Welcome this evening with Imtiaz Mir. Recent massive protest erupted in Israel with a very tragic incident happened, hostage deaths. Today's my guest is Dan Ferferman, an author, writer, researcher, speaker, thinker, and executive director of Sharaka. It's a pleasure to have you on my show.
Thank you, Imtiaz. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Situation is a very tense after hostage deaths. Netanyahu government is under pressure. What would you say?
We are heartbroken by this entire war, by every death. But I think these 6 deaths especially really broke our hearts here. These are 6 young people in their 20s who were at a music festival, kidnapped, tortured, held hostage for the last 300 days, and executed and shot in the head just before the IDF, the Israeli army rescuers, could reach to them. And it just shows the kind of brutal enemy, the brutal, ruthless enemy that we are facing. And it puts us in a big dilemma. Hamas, the enemy here, Hamas, does not care about civilian lives, certainly not Israeli civilian lives, and they don't care about Palestinian civilian lives, and they use them like pawns for their greater goal, and the destruction serves their goals. It's very difficult the last 2 days here, and it puts the government understandably in a dilemma, because the military pressure is the only thing that forces Hamas to make concessions, but you see that they're willing to execute the hostages, which is the only form of leverage they have. Israeli decision makers at this time. National pressure has been grossly misplaced. It should be placed 100% on Hamas. It should be placed on the Iranians. It should be placed on the Qataris to give up these hostages and end this war, and save Israeli lives and save Palestinian lives, because that is the only thing dragging this war out.
Is President Joe Biden criticism is a damaging Israel narrative?
When the criticism from any of our allies, whether it's from the White House or right now the British decision, is very damaging, because what Hamas, what the terrorists, what the Islamists try to do is create fissures and divisions within the we'll call it the civilized community of nations. And so they want a situation in which Israel's greatest ally, the United States, is openly criticizing it. And so of course there will always be disputes and disagreements between allies, even the best of friends. Even my wife and I disagree frequently, but those have to remain behind closed doors. And the only pressure consistently needs to be on Hamas, on Iran, on Qatar, on the radical axis. And the second that there is public pressure and disputes against Israel and against Israeli decision makers, then they have achieved their goal of divide and weaken, which is what they try to do every time.
There is a growing anger upward against civilian casualties in Gaza.
Sorry, say that again.
There is a growing anger in our world over civilian casualties, civilian deaths in Gaza.
Every civilian death in Gaza is tragic, and it is solely the fault of Hamas. Hamas did not need to start the war. Hamas did not need to launch this attack. Hamas could have given back the hostages on October 8th. Hamas could have laid down its arms and ended this war. Hamas can end this war anytime it wants. Hamas wants to achieve all of its goals without paying a price. And we cannot allow that to happen, or else they have won, and they'll do it again. They'll do it to us. They'll do it to any country that seeks peace and stability in this region. They'll do it to you in Pakistan. They'll do it to our friends in the Gulf countries. It's already happening to the West. If the civilized countries of this world do not stand strong against radicalized Islamist terrorist groups and militant groups, then we will lose.
Is the Prime Minister Netanyahu is losing his popularity due to recent hostage deaths?
He's been losing, unfortunately, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been losing popularity for a long time. The general consensus is that there is very little trust in the government. There's very little trust in his leadership right now. And certainly, losing these 6 young hostages, especially, hostages whose families had become internationally recognized, like Hirsch Goldberg, and of course that damages even greatly, even more his popularity. It's seen, and rightly so, as a failure. I don't dare to say what I would have done different in his shoes. I think being an Israeli decision maker is probably the most difficult job in the world. But unless you come out with a clear success, like last week, the rescue of the Israeli Muslim Bedouin hostage who was rescued alive, that was a wonderful success. But then that's immediately, unfortunately, followed up by 6 failures to rescue these young and well-known hostages.
Policy of this government, Netanyahu government is isolating Israel from the key global powers.
I believe it is. I believe, unfortunately, the government here has not had its messaging strategy and public relations strategy coordinated and unified. And part of that is we have a very raucous democracy. You have ministers, Knesset members, even mayors or former generals who have no political power, or who have very little political power, saying things that are completely out of line with government strategy. You have people in power, out of power, formerly in power, saying things to placate very right-wing elements of this country for domestic political reasons, and that is misunderstood by the international community. It's misunderstood by Israel's allies, and unfortunately, we're not seeing a clear articulation of what is Israel's strategy to win this war, and so that leads to an alienation of allies and friends, and I think having a clear strategy is critical. Articulating that clear strategy both in private and publicly through the media is something that I don't think has been done, and certainly has not been done well enough by this government.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your valuable insights. Stay safe and take care. Until next show.